All right, so start the TST call. We have a pretty full agenda, so I want to get right to it. Let's start with status of 4.1, and I think that might mean, Mark, it would be good to start with you for the eCord piece.
Okay. So we're in really good shape. I think we have all the pieces, all the features that we committed to are in place. We have been doing, we automated a lot of the testing, and that seems to pass most of the time. There's once in a while, there's like what Zach calls an intermittent or transient networking problem. But rerunning the build usually fixes that without any like manual intervention. So we have not automated all the testing, and that was intentional because we just weren't ready to do that in terms of data plane testing. But we are running those manually, and those look perfectly fine. There's like a couple of more bugs that we're fixing. Andrea and I have identified. In the meantime, we've done the upgrade of ONAS, or at least, you know, the latest ONAS with all the patches that we needed has been released by Ray yesterday. So now it's a matter for us to apply the latest patches to the Cord platform and bump up all the versioning for the applications to, you know, the official release version, and then I think we're good to go. So we have no really big blockers. And we can easily release end of this week.
Okay. By the way, if you're not speaking, if you can go on mute. I'm not sure where that background noise is coming from, but somewhere. Thanks, Mark. So, I'll come back to, I guess, Andy in a minute about cutting the release candidate. But is there anyone on that can speak to the status of mCord?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, Luca.
So. I don't know. So for sure, in terms of documentation, we are fine. I think.
The documentation is out in front.
Yeah. For the status of the software, I know NG4T is provided a new VM tonight. Pimping is going to try it today. I know Trapan had a few automation pieces to put in place, missing. The news that is not encouraging is that for now we've never tried at this point yet the system with an automated build. So we still don't know if the final system works altogether, you know. But I don't know. I think developers are pretty happy and positive. I think there's also Andy online that can maybe comment more, and Trapan as well. I think for sure we are in a good direction. I'm not 100% sure we can close this thing by Friday.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask what's the precise date or hour or time that we intend to release?
Well, at this point, it is now entirely dependent upon passing tests and everyone giving their approval. I mean, our target is the end of the week, but it's not until you and everyone involved here says it's met the test that I thought it was supposed to meet. Andy, where do you see it?
Right. So I think the just to amplify Luca, the release criterion that we have for mCord is we click build in Jenkins and the pod comes up in an automated manner and gets configured, and then maybe there's some manual steps that need to be taken by following the guide. For instance, configuring the fabric, I think might be one of those steps. And then we can perform a manual test using the NG4T appliance and see it working. We have not got to that point yet.
All right, so on both cases, there will be manual tests run against the data plane, but to the extent possible, you've automatically built.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Yeah, it's the same for eCord. I think, you know, bringing it up is a thing that is 100% automated, but the testing is not. And as long, well, actually also the automation of bringing it up, there's a piece that is still manual. That's the CFM. That's a feature for like fault management. Max is working on the automation, but if it doesn't work, before the end of the week, then we don't put it in. But we have it written down on the wiki, so that's good enough, right? It's same applies for MCord, but at least release something that works, that people can get to work.
Yeah, that's the goal for now. Exactly.
I think compared to the planning, we are also more, they did even more because
we did move the goalpost closer.
Yeah, I think at the beginning we said that the end-to-end testing should be still manual. I think we are very close to make it work completely automated. So.
All right. So.
I'm also here, and from a developer perspective, I think just one more point. Before the Thanksgiving, right now we didn't automatic everything because Sapan is merging his code. We haven't, but before Thanksgiving, we bring up the 3 instance automatically, not through EPC, just through the build process. We tested the end-to-end path, then the path works. So right now we are confident. And this week, Sapan merging his code, we bring up the 3 instances from the EPC and the service. That's the last step for this week from the developer's perspective. So right now, maybe no blockers right now. So that's why we are think it should be okay for Friday.
Okay, so Sapan, I guess it falls into you on the way that you're bringing up the EPC. That's no blockers. That should work.
Yeah. So tentatively, no blockers. That should work. All the code, the functionality-wise, everything got checked in and merged yesterday morning. As far as the EPC service goes, I spent much of yesterday looking into nits and bugs with Hu Jung and Andy, and I think Hu Jung and I got much of it working last night, and Andy made a few fixes, and so in isolation, outside of the data path, things seem to be chugging along. They seem to be working well. So there are no blockers, no showstoppers, no new functionalities to implement. Just testing and fixing bugs when we run into them.
Okay, thanks. So we're not quite ready for a release candidate. This will be the first time we have a release candidate with 3 different profiles. No.
I wanted to say that.
We're not in time, but that would have been yesterday, perhaps.
Yeah.
But this will be the first time that we will have a release candidate that includes 3 different profiles to be tested, because we've always just tested 1. So that will change the the approval process. Andy, anything on your mind from the release candidate prep?
No, not particularly. Just in terms of the timeline, because it's Tuesday and things are still coming together on the MCord side, I would be pleasantly surprised if we were ready on Friday to release. But I think cutting a release candidate on Friday sounds like that could be in the realm of possibility.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else have thoughts, comments, feedback, questions?
Yes, last thing, sorry. In 4.1 already, since we have a big request, I would like to include really the installation from China, which implies that I move the files from GitHub. I think I might make it.
I'm lost a bit.
I didn't understand what you want to do, Luca. What do you mean? Include the installation in China? You mean like the instructions?
Sorry. Italian English sometimes comes out. So make the installation process working in China. So to do that, I need to take the instructions we wrote for a specific service provider, made them generic. In order to do that, the software needs to be downloadable from China. In order to do that, I need to move the software from wherever it is now, which goes from Dropbox of single people to Google, into GitHub. It's a very easy operation. I need to download the software from one side and upload it on the other. There are still few decisions I need to discuss with other Cord people, but I think this is a very important thing to have in.
Yeah, I would agree.
For one, and it comes almost for free because the documentation is already there. I will take care of it. That's like 3 hours operation. Before, we just need to download the software from one side and upload it on the other. That's it.
All right.
So, because there are many people on the mailing list who are also by private emails asking for this thing. You know?
Yeah. So that should be part of all. I agree. Yeah. Okay. Let's move along. Let me do some screen share here. So there has been, can you see my screen? Is anyone logged in here that can verify that my screen is showing?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay.
Yeah, it showed up.
Okay, so I just wrote this down so I wouldn't be saying it and getting it wrong. There has been, this is primarily within, or most exclusively within ONF, discussion about trying to better align the ONOS release schedule and the Cord release schedule because there are dependencies, and to stretch the Cord cadence from 3 months to 4 months. I'm sorry, not Cord, the ONOS cadence from 3 months to 4 months. And to align them or to stagger them so that a Cord release would build on, every 4 months would be able to build on a 2-month-old ONOS release. ONOS was about to release in December, and so stretching from there puts them on an April, August, December. I may have said that wrong. They're scheduled their next release December. That puts them on an April, August, December cadence. Cord was planning to release in January, but to line up, we would stretch it out to February. I doubt that anyone's going to complain about that. It also moves us away from the end of the year, which is a bonus. So that would go February, June, October. So that would mean very pragmatically that there would be the next release that we're talking about for Cord would come there. That gives us, by the way, 3 sprints, roughly 3-week sprints, give or take holidays. I forget exactly how it worked out, remaining in 5.0. So we're essentially doing 2 half releases here with the 4.1. We only planned 4.1. We need to do a little bit more planning than next week for the remainder of the release of 5.0. Next week? Next week.
No, tomorrow.
Next week. Yeah, next week. I don't know what steps have to happen to make this official, but just to let everyone know that this is in the works. Any comments, feedback, thoughts? Maybe we should send this out on the Cord and ONOS mailing list.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought on the ONOS side, the idea was to go to more frequent releases rather than less frequent releases.
Well, this is, okay, good point. So that this does not preclude intermediate releases at all.
Yeah.
This is primarily aligning the major releases so that we can coordinate longer term planning across those projects.
Right.
Yeah. So, ideally, we're doing releases as frequently as we can possibly do them.
And then the other thing would be that there was also this idea that we would try and separate out things like segment routing and the drivers needed outside of ONOS so that they could be released independently of ONOS. on us wouldn't be so stark, I guess. Yeah.
Good, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what that's at.
That's still an option. It's just in a lower priority option because the core dependency on ONAS usually works out fine if we use the previous ONAS release, and the staggering will also help. That still remains an option. It's just been lower priority because there's been other things on our mind. But the separating of the app is not that hard, actually. It's the drivers that are harder, and so we just punted on that for a while because it seemed like the cord release's dependency on ONAS was working out fine.
Yeah.
Like the current cord release 4.0 uses ONAS 1.10, and the next one will use ONAS 1.12. 1.12 is releasing in December, so the February release of Cord will use 1.12, and it seems like it's okay for now. So if there was a very high reason, we can move the priority up for trying to separate out the drivers, but we didn't want to go through that right now, just because there's dependencies on Trellis, which were much more urgent.
Yeah, on a similar line, there was discussion in Cord to release independently the different components, but I don't think this schedule will affect that.
I don't think it, right, so I don't think it affects it, and we talked a lot about the impact of that and decided just to stay with a simple general strategy, and then we can incrementally do 5.1, 5.2s, whatever to account for that. It's, you think of the Cord platform, and then you would want the services to stagger from the Cord platform, except I think they're going to end up fairly tightly coupled now, because to onboard your service, you've onboarded the appropriate recipes and playbooks and models, and hopefully those things, the foundation for those don't change quite so frequently, but we'll see. Okay. So the other thing that we have, and now we have about 40 minutes for our two proposals. I guess I've got the Eternity one up here first, so let's start with that. So this proposal has been circulated. So if you were interested, you've taken a look. I guess, Ken, could you speak to it for a minute?
Sure. I think, it's a pretty long document, so I'll sort of skip to the highlights. I think the screen that you're showing here is good, figure 1, as a place to start talking. What we're interested in doing in Eternity is giving Cord the ability to provision fully compliant, feature complete, and scalable MEF 2.0 services on an eCord pod. Today, I think, the architecture is quite nice. It sets up pretty basic services, but I don't think they have all the features and functionality required to be deployable. So we'd like to do a proof of concept by inserting, we have call it a smart NIC, it's FPGA based, that goes into a server and can offload that carry Ethernet switching, either but locally switching traffic or inserting, offloading part of the workload and sending the rest to the host, whether that be a VNF for higher level routing protocols, or to eventually sort of a multi-access edge application that's there for latency processing of that Ethernet, of that enterprise Ethernet traffic. We believe that this is a pretty, fits well within the Cord architecture. I think we're introducing sort of a new element to the overall architecture in terms of a class of smart NIC. That is something we've already had very high level discussions with Mark and Andrea about, but we need to determine how to handle that. It's got some, it's got subtle differences in deployment over a separate Ethernet switch.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting to use this as a driver for extending the architecture to account for that flexibility.
Yeah. Yes. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, my comment would be that it would be really interesting to understand how SparkNICs or in general any other kind of accelerator can work in the Cord architecture. So for example, in your diagram, how it interacts with the vSwitch that it sits behind. Is there any implications on the vSwitch? Or how it interacts with that intra-CO network, which is the hardware fabric that those servers and those NICs are sitting in. How would it affect that fabric, and does it require place any new requirements on the fabric? So these are two different interactions on the data plane which are necessary to understand. And then the other thing that we need to understand is from an orchestration point of view. How does XOS understand that? We always say that there are two kinds of VNFs, so to speak, in Cord. One where the VNF is actually, say, a VM that is sitting in the data plane inside some server, or the VNF is actually implemented by an SDN app that happens to implement that functionality, say, in the fabric or in the vSwitch or in the access device and so on. And now there is going to be a third way to implement the VNF, which is taking into account these accelerators, right? So all these three interactions, right, will be key in understanding how we can bring this new class of VNF, so to speak, into the Cord architecture.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's some differences here. I think that there's definitely going to be impact on the vSwitch. Beyond carry Ethernet, we can do things like tunnel offload and things like common techniques that improve system performance. That's not necessarily our goal here, but I think we'll find a lot of those interactions. We're also, I think, we're moving, and I haven't completely worked the details of this with Mark and Andrea yet, but we're moving the carry Ethernet functionality to sort of from the access point directly to more of a centralized location potentially through the fabric. So, we need to build a flexible system that allows, or a flexible architecture, I should say, that allows that functionality to move, right, within the deployment. The pod that we're proposing to do our development on is pretty basic. It's a couple servers with a couple cards each. But I think when we get closer, I think we talked about a Q1 release, and what we really wanted to do there is, bring out a couple cards and put them in the eCord pod in California and see if we can get it up and running in there, right? So we want to move towards a much more uniform model with what eCord and the other pods are doing today, right?
Yeah. So my concern is, of course, that this gets introduced in a way that other accelerators could be inserted in the architecture, right? Yep. So there's a generic model behind it, and it's not specific to a given vendor. And then just as mentioned, how all this interacts with the existing model and components needs to be defined.
Yep. I think we're very interested in both of those things. I mean, we're our IP is in our firmware, our FPGA, so there's a lot of different potential platforms out there for us, and we want to see a robust accelerator ecosystem, right, that includes the software interfaces to manage it. We're following things like Cyborg within OpenStack, and we'll try to leverage any kind of techniques and approaches that the industry is taking to make this more manageable.
So you mentioned this as a POC, I mean, and even said you're looking to put it into the pod. I guess, what is your expected outcome from this? If you said, 2 months down the road, what do you expect to see, or what do you expect to have happened?
Yeah, so in 2 months, I think we're talking about really kicking this off in earnest at the beginning of the year, doing some architecture work before that, but really starting developing. What we want to be able to do is basically show multiple carry Ethernet services configured and deployed and tested through this network, and have those services built, transported over some nominal transport network.
Do you see this only valuable in terms of the E-Cord, or do you see this applicable in the other cord flavors?
I personally, I think it's very applicable to, and it should provide, we should be targeting a more converged pod, right? So, there's no reason to have an enterprise cord pod if you add an OLT in front of it, not to be able to support a residential cord.
Okay.
But, I'm trying to be careful with the scope of work.
Yep.
To just do this in chunks instead of trying to bite off everything.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to that. It's good to push forward with a modest scope, as long as we're looking towards the end game. Mark, do you?
Yeah, I have one question. Don't you have any other companies that were stepping up and wanting to introduce these, whatever you call it, smart NICs or accelerator type of thing?
I believe Tom Tofik has at various times brought in different companies, for example, Netronome, that also wants to, have smart NICs in there. There's another company he just talked to me about yesterday, and I don't recall the name, but perhaps this is an opportunity.
Yeah, it is. We should go back through the set of things going on, and because there have been, I can't remember which ones they were.
Yeah, because I'm convinced, Eternity is just one, and it was David who asked, like, do you only see this applicable in eCord? No, I think the answer is very clear, right? So this is a good opportunity for the TST or the Cord platform team to come together with this kind of new feature. Because clearly, I mean, there's the hardware side of things, but the platform also needs to be aware of, like, tracking these kind of resources and enabling this. Yeah, this is a great opportunity for all of us to come together.
Right. So I think it's on the TST a little bit to make sure we organize around some of the architecture generality work, and not obviously push all that burden onto to these guys.
Yeah, I mean that's where we'd really like to have Mark and Andrea's help, right? I mean, first of all, they understand the current architecture better than we're going to for a long time, and we want, guidance, having an independent set of eyes looking at what we're doing to make sure we're kind of fulfilling these higher level architectural objectives. That would be great.
Great. So
I think, Larry, you mentioned this concept of a liaison. I forget the term you used, and I'm very willing to step up, but I don't have all the information or all the pieces to the puzzle here. So I will be working closely with many people in the TST or in the Cord team to try and get this thing as generic as possible.
Timothy, just a minute, please. Essentially, what we want to propose Cord for the eCode first is a production-ready solution for carrier Ethernet that simply plug into the servers. This is based on our eNet solution, which is deployed at more than 500,000 systems in carrier Ethernet, in broadband access, in mobile EPC application, and whatever. So essentially, what we see here the opportunity to bring to eCode the production level solution for complete carrier Ethernet compliance solution that can plug into the server, working with the virtualization environment, working with the SDN environment, and the other. Obviously, on top of that, we can further, following that, we also work on virtual CPE for residential, so it can be also be applicable for residential code. We also, the same kind of firmware that work on the FPGA is also deployed as EPC accelerator, which can also be populated in M code. But we obviously first we want to, focus on this E code and be able to, as soon as possible, come up with a production level solution for E code that to move to so contribute E code and code with a solution which is not kind of proof of concept or whatever. It's actually it's based on real product now.
Okay.
The different
Yeah,
the main for us the main thing here is the openness, because at the end we delivered our solution on FPGA. So if you do and work with kind of this platform that runs the software run on server, accelerator run on FPGAs, and then going forward means any kind of NIC card, FPGA-based NIC card, okay? There can be many kind of companies offer different kind of accelerators on FPGA, which is this kind of trend is supported by Microsoft, is supported by Intel and Amazon and many other guys to go with FPGA as an accelerator. This is what we actually propose to the code and environment.
No, I'm not. So conscious of the time, we completely get the value. We're 100% for this, and that there's generality beyond eCord is great. Our only issue is we want to proceed in a way that we view this as a demonstration of something that we can do in a general way, and it sounds like that is very consistent with where you want to go. So I think I'm happy with it. I got 3 guys here shaking on the TS4, shaking their heads. Anyone on? David, Andy?
Yeah, I'm good with this. Again, my concern, as long as we're staying in creating a general model for this capability, as like Saurav said, a new type of VNF, if you will. I think that's a fine plan. We just need to make sure that carries on and that this isn't a one-off thing.
Andy?
Yeah, same with me.
And Mark?
What David said.
We're good with Mark too. All right, so this is.
Yeah, I'm good.
Let's consider this one done. Thank you.
Great. So Larry, this is David. I'll follow up with them separately to move the process forward.
Okay, thanks. And we do need to treat this as a general issue of the TST, that we follow through on how to bring smart NICs into the fold more thoroughly. Okay, I'm not sure from Kalum. Warren, are you going to speak to the proposal?
And just signing on. I'll stay online, but I'm going to mute myself. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, Suresh will
okay.
we'll talk to this.
Okay, so let's just give us the executive summary of what you're proposing, so we can get everyone caught up.
Okay, so what we're trying to build is a software-based fabric for handling flows, and what we're trying to do here is propose that as a solution for a edge data center using Cord. So starting off, like, we are probably more targeted towards the M Cord, but we can discuss, like, if you can make it like more general than that. But that's the initial thinking from our side. And the way we want to like do this is interface into ONOS using netconf, and also provide some amount of control using OpenFlow, but we're not like entirely natively using OpenFlow inside the fabric for doing our flow stuff. but we are using P4. So one of the mechanisms by which we can support OpenFlow is by downloading P4 code into our switches for using OpenFlow. So so this another thing like we are kind of like trying to emphasize is working with the P4 runtime. Whenever like we have like better details on it, we would like to also use P4 runtime to program the fabric whenever the system is initialized inside the Cord system.
So
and another yeah, go ahead.
So I would just sort of take this conversation the same direction that the previous one in. There shouldn't be anything that I see here that's Cord specific. This is the fabric of Cord, and so even though you sort of came at this from an Cord perspective, I would encourage you to think of it as platform. Cord is a common platform for all the various flavors.
So it's possible that in the some of the things that the existing Cord fabric does not provide, for example, slicing, QoS, that is on the roadmap for the existing fabric and is being requested by Cord. This Kalum fabric could do that. But before it does that, I mean, it has to still show that the basic functionality that is provided by the Cord fabric today can be replicated, can be provided by the Kalum fabric. And once that can happen, then it's like a drop-in replacement for the trellis fabric, and then you can build in the newer functionality that is not existing in the current trellis fabric, right? So,
right, like exactly, yeah.
And again, I see this as a kind of fabric as a service in that terms that drop in, right? We need to be able to abstract away the fabric properly so that either one can be used.
Right. So the existing functionality, I mean, there's on the Cord wiki page, there is the latest release of Cord so far, that is Cord 4.0, uses ONOS 1.10, and under the Cord wiki page for Trellis, there is a section that says, this is the functionality that the Cord fabric uses today, which is, simple bridging, unicast routing, multicast routing, and so on, vRouter functionality for working with the upstream network. So the first step would be to replicate that basic functionality. Otherwise, you're not a drop-in replacement for the Trellis fabric. And then the second step would be to ensure that, the Cord build process that goes through there are some steps that are done in an automated way, some steps that are done in a manual way. You would have to work your way into the Cord build process and as a second option for the Trellis fabric, right?
Excellent.
Can I quickly ask, are there functions in the fabric that are optional at this point? So I don't know, like things like multi-homing or pseudo wire, where we could say, hey, no one is really relying on it, so they are add-on features for the core fabric service.
So I didn't mention those features because they're not used by Cord yet, right? So dual homing is something that Trellis supports, but it's not used in Cord. IPv6 is something that Trellis supports both for unicast and multicast traffic, but Cord doesn't use that yet. Pseudo wires is something that has just come into Trellis, but eCord doesn't use that yet, or our Cord doesn't use that yet. So these extra features are something that is worth keeping in mind for the future. But at a minimum, you have to be able to show that the Kalum fabric can replicate the existing features that are in fact used by Cord right now.
Right. Like, so the one thing like I can tell you is like most of the stuff like looks okay to me. The only thing is the trunk VLAN stuff. I'm not sure like is this going to be something like PBB or not, right? Because we don't support PBB, for example. So if it's just Mac and Mac and somebody else takes care of everything, we can, right? So L2 bridging works, IPv4 unicast routing, IPv4 multicast works, IPv6 works as well, but as you said, like it's not required, but it works anyway. Our system is fully based on V6, and the vRouter works, like interfacing the external router can also work, and the static routes work. So like so if that's the feature set, everything looks clear to like me personally, except the trunk VLAN. So that's the part probably we need to sit down and talk a little bit about. to see what exactly the trunk VLAN entails.
Even beyond that, I'm worried more about the integration than the feature set, right? I think the feature set can be addressed, but it's going to be the integration into the workflows, into the provisioning, into the configuration, into the automation. That I think is going to be very complicated, more so than anything else, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I think like we are interested in certainly getting the groundwork done for that, right? Like so. Right now, we do have like a provisioning workflow that's based on ONI, for example, right? And I do think we can easily adopt like any kind of provisioning workflow, but it's work that needs to get done. So, and we are willing to put in that work. So this is not like something we are trying to get out of, right? Like we would like to get that work done. So once we know like all the touch points, we will make sure that work is done.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I agree with David that the main value for us would be to have the ability of plug and play different fabrics. And at that point, if we need different feature in different fabrics for different scenarios, but we can switch them.
So
for both of these proposals, are we going to be able to do some sort of automated nightly testing as the build changes to make sure that kind of these both drop-ins, including Trellis at this point, work as code evolves?
So I think nightly testing for the fabric is still evolving. We're close with some of the things that
we have actually the script to fully automate the fabric configuration,
but not the data plane testing yet, right?
Well, then you have to do a ping, but now, I mean, you have to type ping, but we can, with our amazing technology, we can do that.
But my point being, as we get these new plug-in replacements or secondary implementations of the service, we need to make sure that there's some sort of nightly build going, so as the core changes, if you will, that these integrations continue to work.
So we are going to merge, I think, pretty soon, not this week, but pretty soon, the patch to configure automatically the fabric and then do the data plane test. So then if we have the right abstraction, as I assume, it should be just a matter of running this job against a pod using that fabric.
Okay.
And it should.
But if it also means any hardware, we're going to need access to that too.
Sorry, David?
This was having hardware, both for the smart NICs as well as for these P4 switches.
Well, in theory, what would be ideal is that, sorry, what was the name of the Kalum? That Kalum creates, as other companies do, a VPN with us, and they make the pod available. I know I'm asking too much now, but then we can run one of our Jenkins job against the pod and verify nightly the results.
Excellent. Like so.
One question I have is, so whose switches are you using?
So we are using Barefoot switches, right? And we have 3 white box manufacturers who are making them for us. And we have some like A0 switches, but the B0 switches are expected next month. So we haven't gotten them in volume, but we do have switches with working code already. And so like hopefully like late December or early January, we can have like a full-fledged Cord system pod running. Right?
Okay.
And
what I don't understand is if you're using Barefoot switches, did you say you're using netconf to control them?
No. Like netconf is used to configure our fabric. So like we have fabric controller servers. That's what we talk to using netconf. So we have Yang model, like it's based on the IETF Yang model for a fabric that we use to model our system, and then we download like the P4 code to the switches ourselves.
So what do your control servers do then? Is it an SDN controlled fabric, so to speak, or are you using distributed routing protocols or?
So a couple of things, right? So one of them, our fabric controllers make the whole fabric look like a virtual switch to the outside world, right? So one of the things like we expose netconf interface, or we have interface towards OpenStack with an ML2 plugin, so where we can actually look like a switch to somebody outside. And we also have distributed routing protocols mainly to talk to the outside world and to also have connect the multiple L2 segments that you would like to connect inside the fabric.
Okay, I dropped in a replacement. Huh? This is the whole of Trust.
Yeah, without the virtual switching part, right? Without VTN. Right. But okay, but did you understand how it's actually operating?
I told you to do a bit at Cord Tst, and yeah, they're a separate sort of fabric control service and things like ONOS service.
No, I understand that part, right? How ONOS can probably talk netconf with the IETF models to talk to their control servers. What do the control servers do to make the fabric work, right? I mean, what I'm trying to say is your control servers talking P4 runtime down to your switches, or are your switches just operating independently using routing protocols? That's the part.
So right now they don't talk P4 runtime, right? Because we started working like before there was like P4 runtime. So right now they talk using like a proprietary mechanism to go talk to the switches. And the other things like that happen is like we use LLDP to discover topology. So the fabric controller figures out the topology. It sets up the load balancing rules like the failure recovery and stuff like that inside the switches. Okay, and it also runs the distributed routing protocols mainly for talking to the outside world and to connect independent L2 networks inside the fabric. Okay, so this would be like, yeah. Okay.
So
go ahead.
So you're not using OpenFlow, you're not using P4 runtime, you're using some proprietary mechanism from your control servers to populate forwarding rules in the P4 switch. Am I clear? Am I right so far?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Somewhat, so do you have any plans of, ONOS is developing P4 runtime support. So instead of using your control servers, would you consider, I mean, this is just I'm just curious, would you consider using P4 runtime and an ONOS app using P4 runtime to directly talk to the switches? Because that's something that we are working on right now.
Absolutely, that's what I said. Like, so when we started off, like P4 runtime didn't exist, right? Like, so we started off in like about like 10 months ago. So we are absolutely open to using P4 runtime. So that's where like we see the work ongoing with ONOS. Like that's like something that I think is very valuable for us.
Okay, that changes everything. I mean, if they're substituting ONOS for the proprietary pieces, then wouldn't it run the same apps? Then it's just a hardware change.
If they use ONOS instead of their control servers, that's what you're saying. Yeah, then it's a hardware change, and well, yeah, I mean, it's also a control mechanism change because we use OpenFlow right now. But if you use P4 runtime,
right.
Yeah.
That's assuming ONOS plus P4.
Yeah.
And that's where you would like to take this?
That's what it sounds like. But for now, I think they're going to continue using their control servers with their proprietary mechanism to talk to the switches and find a way for ONOS to talk to their control servers.
All right.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the early steps, yes.
I don't see any problems.
David, Andy, Mark?
No, I'm good.
With all the caveats that we've been talking through.
Yeah, it's the integration part that's going to be hard, because you're trying to replace a big chunk of the Cord network infrastructure, and so you have to ensure that it still plugs in and works with the rest of the stuff, including the build process.
Yeah.
Help us improve the build process. It's fine.
One other thing is, in terms of testing, what sort of infrastructure do we need for these projects? know the earlier party said that they wanted to ship us cards and put them in a server here. I'm not sure, is that practical, or do we need each of these partners
I think this is what Luca
to
called
fund?
out. This is what Luca called out, that we would want to VP into their site where they had a pod that we could run Jenkins against when we get to that point. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so we can easily slice our fabric and give you like remote access to a pod. And we do have some automated testing infrastructure ourselves that, like, you know, every time we check in something, like there's like a build that runs. So I don't think it's going to be difficult, but I think there's work there figuring out like how to integrate the automated testing stuff like from ours into the Cord automated testing. But we have pretty advanced automated testing for everything. And we do like a lot of stuff using Cucumber and Godog. Like most of our stuff is written in Go, the control plane code. So we have quite a bit of code, like testing code. So I think it shouldn't be an issue. Like, but we had to still figure out like the interface, like, you know, how to call that and how to take the use cases from Cord and write the high-level use cases for our testing.
Okay, everyone's no objections? All right, great, thank you.
All right, great. This is David again. I'll follow up as well with Gloom.
Thanks, David.
Thank you very much, folks. Thanks for your time.
I didn't know that we would. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to just.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Larry.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to remind everybody that you've probably seen the information on the Cord Discuss list, but I wanted to remind everybody that there are 3 trainings coming up for the new Cord dashboards. I would encourage everybody to go to at least the first one if you can. The first one is an introduction, and it goes through all of the content that is there. I think it would be really helpful for you to have an understanding of what now is available to you. And then perhaps after people have had a chance to look at that, we could have a discussion at a future TST meeting about what metrics may be helpful for us and what, you know, how we may want to monitor those or plug those into what we're doing. And if you can't make that, the introduction meeting is this Thursday. If you can't make that, we will record it. And then just a note for the other 2. The other 2 are more advanced. The other 2 are if you want to dive into the data and get more hands-on with it and create some more custom views of the data. But those will be next week. So, and those will be recorded as well. But I would encourage everybody to at least go to the first one if you can make it.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.